This conference will now be recorded.
In yesterday's session, we created a Kubernetes cluster with single node, a single master, and 2 workers. So we created total 3 node Kubernetes cluster. I hope everyone is able to create a Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So today we'll try to understand some concepts in Kubernetes before we deploy applications in Kubernetes cluster. As I already told, Kubernetes works in a cluster background. It will have a group of servers. In the cluster, we will have a group of servers. We will have masters and we will have workers. Something like this. We'll have a master, we'll have a worker. So any application you want to deploy, you need to request master, the master machine in the cluster. Let's see, where is the diagram? Yeah. So you have a Kubernetes cluster like this. Anything you want to deploy in Kubernetes cluster, we have to request the master, the control plane. The control plane here is nothing but the master node. So as I already told, we can communicate with Kubernetes cluster using CLI, that is kubectl, and GUI here. That GUI also will communicate with master. So the master machine will schedule the applications. Here we call it as a pods. The master machine will schedule the pods to the nodes within the cluster. But before we deploy, we try to understand the concepts, Kubernetes resources or Kubernetes objects we call it. So what are the Kubernetes objects we have and how to create those objects or how to deploy those objects in the cluster. So in Kubernetes, we have a lot of resources. We call it as a Kubernetes objects, resources, objects, or workloads, all are same. So we have a lot of Kubernetes resources or objects like this: pod, service, replication controller, replica set, daemon set, deployment, stateful set, persistent volume, and persistent volume claim. Like this, you have a lot of Kubernetes resources: config map, secret, like this we have a lot of Kubernetes resources, Kubernetes objects. So based on your requirement, based on your use case, we need to create these resources or we need to create these objects or resources in the Kubernetes cluster to deploy the application. Not all these resources, based on your use case, based on your requirement, you need to create or deploy these Kubernetes resources. First, Kubernetes objects are basically persistent entities in the Kubernetes system. So to deploy any application, you need to create few resources. Kubernetes will use these resources or use these entities to represent state of your cluster. So Kubernetes object is a record of intent. Once you create the object, which means once you create these Kubernetes resources, any of these Kubernetes resource, Kubernetes system will constantly work to ensure that that resource, that object exists in the cluster. Once you create, the Kubernetes will make sure these resources are exist in the Kubernetes cluster. To work with Kubernetes resources, I mean to say, to deploy these pods, deployments, replica sets or services, whatever it is, to work with these Kubernetes resources, whether you want to create these Kubernetes resources or modify or delete, you need to use Kubernetes API. You need to use Kubernetes API. So how can we interact with Kubernetes API? How can I create? How can I update, delete? We can use kubectl, a command line interface, a command line interface. This CLI, this Kubernetes CLI makes the necessary API calls. It will, in the background, this CLI will make necessary API calls to the Kubernetes API server. If you see, we already have a kubectl installed. I have a Kubernetes cluster. I have one master. I have two workers. I have one cluster. I already have a Kubernetes CLI installed in this machine itself. As I already told, the Kubernetes CLI is installed in this machine itself, in the master machine itself. As I already told, is it mandatory to have kubectl, that CLI in the master, or can I have kubectl configured in any machine? I can interact with my Kubernetes master from any machine. You can interact with Kubernetes master from any machine. You can install kubectl in a separate machine also. But for now, I've installed in this itself instead of creating a separate server. So let me connect to this machine. Let me connect to this machine. I have a kubectl installed. If you see, do I have a kubectl installed in my laptop? Sorry, in this system, not in my laptop, in this system. And also, does this kubectl requires one file in this current user home directory? We need to have one file called config file. Do I have that file? Do we have a Kubernetes details in that file? Like where exactly your Kubernetes API server is running, on which IP, on which port, and the details to connect. It is using these certificates, that Kubernetes root certificates, for authenticating with that Kubernetes. We have the details here. So due to that, am I able to communicate with my Kubernetes APIs? Is this CLI is able to communicate with APIs, Kubernetes APIs? Yes. Here I am executing a command. Here I am executing a command like this: kubectl get nodes, kubectl get pods, something like this. In the background, is this CLI is making a API call in the background and getting the details from the API, the Kubernetes API server? Yes. Whether you want to get, create, update, delete anything in Kubernetes, we have to communicate with API server. If you see, let me show you. I am using -v. I am using -v, just kind of a verbose to see the logs. I am executing kubectl get pods -v like a verbose to see what is happening in the background. If you see, is it making some API call, get call, REST APIs? Do you see? Is it making some API call here? If you see, what is this? That is IP and port. API server port number. API server port number, and on the IP, the API server is listening. And this is one URL. So in the background, is this CLI is making some API call, and is it getting the details? It is a REST API. In the background, it is a REST API, and it is getting 200 response from that REST API. If you see, this is the response body. These are the headers. So in the background, is it making API calls? Is this CLI in the background making API calls? Instead of you write some code, the CLI itself is having a code. If you see the CLI, I am executing CLI, some commands, but in the background, do you see some programmatic language, some code, some classes are being used to make those API calls? We are just executing a command, but in the background, it's a code. If you see in what programmatic language they have written this CLI also, we are executing CLI, but in CLI in the background, some class, some methods are getting executed. So they have written in a Go language. But do I need to worry about, do I need to learn this Go language, all these things to deal with Kubernetes, to deploy applications in Kubernetes? Not required, right? Just to show that in the background, is everything is going via API server. If you want to create, update, delete any application, any Kubernetes resource in the cluster, the kubectl can be used. So the kubectl CLI to work with Kubernetes objects, whether you want to create, modify, get, delete, you need to use kubectl. You need to use Kubernetes API. If you use kubectl, that CLI makes the necessary API calls for you. Is this CLI is making necessary API calls based on the commands which we are executing? Is it making the necessary API calls in the background? Yes. Now similarly, kubectl get pods -v verbose I am just using to see what is happening in the background. If you see, is it making necessary API calls? I am trying to get the pods. Is it making that API call to get the details? Yes. So just to show that I am using -v, if I don't use -v, it will just display whatever is getting. It will not display. It will not display what is happening in the background. It will just display the result. If I want to see what is happening in the background, I can use something like this. If I use -v, verbose kind of a option, is it showing this one? What is happening in the background? Yes. So Kubernetes CLI, kubectl can be used to create, update, delete, or get any Kubernetes resource in the cluster. Now, we have a lot of Kubernetes resources. What is what we will understand? What is what we will understand? Now, first, let's understand namespace. First, we will understand namespace. Kubernetes namespace. What is Kubernetes namespace? If you see, by default, kubectl get namespaces or kubectl get ns. Ns or namespace, both are same. So in the NS short form, namespace full form. By default, how many namespaces we have in this Kubernetes cluster? If you see, 4 namespaces are there. Node is also one Kubernetes resource. Node is also one Kubernetes resource. Node is different, namespace is different. Node is nothing but what? Node is nothing but what? Node is basically a server. The server. Node is basically a machine. That node can be a master node or that node can be a worker node. That is a physical machine or virtual machine which is part of the cluster. That node can be a physical node or virtual node. That can be a master node or worker node. This is node. Node is different, namespace is different. So what is this namespace? You can think namespace as a virtual cluster within the Kubernetes cluster. You can think of namespace as a virtual cluster within Kubernetes cluster. We can use namespaces to logically group Kubernetes resources of some application or some team into a separate namespace. So you can think of namespace as a virtual service, I mean to say virtual cluster within your Kubernetes cluster. You can logically isolate Kubernetes resources of one application or one team from other applications, other team in the same Kubernetes cluster. You can have a multiple namespaces. You can have a multiple namespaces inside a single Kubernetes cluster. You can have a multiple namespaces inside a single Kubernetes cluster. So I have only one cluster. This is one cluster. Do I already have multiple namespaces in that cluster? Do I already have multiple namespaces in that cluster? We have already multiple namespaces in that cluster. So each namespace are logically isolated from other. Each namespace is logically isolated from other. Suppose I have multiple teams working. Let's say team A is working and team B is working. Let's say team A is working and team B is working. Now let's say team A is trying to deploy their application. Team A is trying to deploy their application. Let's say they are creating pods, they are creating services, they are creating deployments. And team B also they are trying to deploy their applications. Now I can isolate team A Kubernetes resources from team B Kubernetes resources. I can isolate by using a namespace concept here. Namespace is like a kind of a folder. You can think of a folder. Let's say you have your files, you have your data, right? How do you organize? How do you isolate your personal files from office files? Let's say this is your laptop. This is your laptop. Let's consider this is your laptop. Now you have office files. You have personal files. How do you organize? Will you have everything in a single folder, single directory? You will mess up everything? No, right? So you will organize in a better way, maybe placing in a separate folders, different folders. Same thing. Now this is my Kubernetes cluster. Now I am trying to create pods. I am trying to create services. I am trying to create a deployments. Now other team also, I mean to say same project, same client, but other application, other team also trying to deploy their pods, everything. in the same cluster? Do I need to logically group or do I need to logically isolate these Kubernetes resources of one team from other team in the cluster? Otherwise, do you have a problem in organizing or managing the Kubernetes cluster? If multiple teams are using this Kubernetes cluster, right? You have a difficulty in managing the applications. Now, within this cluster, there is a concept called namespace. By creating the Kubernetes resources of one team or one project in one namespace, by logically grouping these Kubernetes resources into a namespaces. Suppose I am grouping all these Kubernetes resources like pods, deployment services of one project or one team into one namespace. Can I again have these pods, deployments of other application or the other team into a different namespace? Will it be easy for me to manage or organize the Kubernetes resources or cluster if the multiple teams are using or multiple projects are being deployed in same Kubernetes cluster? It will be very easy to manage and organize. So you can think of namespace as a virtual cluster within the Kubernetes cluster. Kind of a logical concept. So this is, let's say they're creating a lot of pods, they're creating deployment, they're creating a lot of Kubernetes services. This is team A related one. Can I have team B related one created in a separate namespace so that we will have a better control of these Kubernetes resources, and whatever Kubernetes resources created in one namespace are logically isolated from other. You can have a multiple namespaces within your Kubernetes cluster and they are logically isolated from each other. So these namespaces will help you. These namespaces can help you and your teams within an organization. It will help you and your teams to organize security and even performance also at a namespace level. If you see, by default we have four namespaces. Now if you see, currently my kubectl is pointing to which namespace? Currently my kubectl is pointing to which namespace? If you say I'm saying kubectl get all objects, all resources. So it is pointing to which namespace? Anyone has any idea? From which namespace it is trying to get all the Kubernetes resources? From which namespace it is trying to get all the Kubernetes resources? If you see, all in the sense there are a lot of Kubernetes resources like pods, deployments, services, all these things. By default, it is pointing to default namespace. Now, if I say something like this, kubectl get all -n, what is this -n stands for? This -n stands for namespace. Now I am trying to say get all Kubernetes resources -n from which namespace I am trying to say? Get Kubernetes resources from which namespace? Kube system. If you see, we already have a lot of things. Do I already have pods in that namespace? Do I have service? Do I have a daemon sets? Do I have a deployments? Do I have a replica sets in that namespace already? If you see, I have a pods, I have a service, I have a daemon sets, I have a deployment, I have a replica set in this namespace. If you see, in this kube system namespace, already we have some Kubernetes resources. If you see, is these pods, deployments are related to which one? If you see these all Kubernetes resources, is it related to our application? Did we deploy any application as of now in this cluster? No. But if you see all these Kubernetes resources like deployments, pods, all these things are related to which one? The Kubernetes related components. The Kubernetes related components. If you see, is that API server is also running as a pod? Do you see is that API server is also running as a pod already? Yes. And do you see control manager also running as a pod? Do you see scheduler running as a pod, etcd running as a pod, and kubeproxy also running as a pod? Kubeproxy also running as a pod. So these are all Kubernetes related stuff. But you may have a question, sir, where is kubelet? Where is kubelet? Make it simple. Let me show you. I don't want to get all objects. kubectl get pods -o wide -n kube system. So I want to see the pods which is running in kube system. I want to see only pods running in kube system. So if you see all my Kubernetes related stuff is running as pod. So what is pod? What is deployment? We will discuss later. First understand namespace. Don't be hurry. Every question will be discussed. First understand what is pod, what is deployment, we will discuss. First focus on namespace. Very, very important. In the interview also they will ask what is namespace in Kubernetes? Why do we need namespaces? Right? Why you are using namespaces in Kubernetes? These type of questions will come. Focus on namespace now. If you see in kube system namespace, I already have some pods. Is all my Kubernetes components like API server, scheduler? If you see, is my API server is also running as a pod? Is my API server also running as pod? In 95, in this 95, in which node this API server is running? In which node this API server is running? Master. In which node this controller is running? This control manager is running. What is that IP? Node IP in which it is running? Master. The scheduler and etcd also in the master. But if you see kubeproxy is running in each node. In the master node also kubeproxy is running. In the worker nodes like 214, 227, these two are worker nodes. In these two nodes also, do you see kubeproxy is running as a pod? Yes. And this ViewNet is basically networking related stuff. That networking driver, do we have that networking driver, that ViewNet networking plugin also? CNI, container networking interface. We have a ViewNet, that is one networking plugin that is also running. We deployed that one, that is also running in all the nodes. But if you see kubelet, that agent, where is that agent? I am not able to see that kubelet agent. Is kubelet agent, that agent is running as a pod? No, that agent is not running as a pod. That agent is running as a normal process in the system. In the system. I mean to say in the master also. In the master also, if you see, do you see is kubelet is running in the master as a normal process? As a normal process. Do you have kubelet process running in the server as a normal process, not as a pod? Similarly, is the kubelet is running as a process in other two machines also? Because if you remember, while installing Kubernetes, did we install kubelet? Did we install kubelet? Did we install kubelet? This kubelet, and also did we started kubelet service, and did we enable kubelet on bootstrap? So kubelet is running as a normal process, but other things, is it running as a pods, that API server, scheduler, etcd, as a pods in the master, and kubeproxy also as a pod in the worker. These are all related to Kubernetes components. I'm just talking about pods here. We have a lot of other objects also, like deployment, service. I'm trying to say now all deployment, services, all these things, these are Kubernetes resources. All these Kubernetes resources, is it already isolated? Is it already isolated into one namespace? In which namespace it is already isolated? All these things are already isolated in which namespace? In which namespace this Kubernetes related stuff is running? It is not running in default, guys. It is not running in default. Let me show. I am not using -n. Is it running in default namespace? Is it running in default namespace? All the Kubernetes related? No. So the Kubernetes related stuff is already running or created. All those Kubernetes resources related to Kubernetes system is running in which namespace? In which namespace? Kube system namespace. Now, is it recommended to deploy any application, any other application related pods, deployment services in this namespace? Is it recommended to deploy our own application or any other application related Kubernetes objects like pods, deployment services in this namespace? No. This is only for Kubernetes related stuff. Similarly, if I want to deploy any application, right, can I create my own namespace and can I deploy the pods, deployment services or anything related to that application in that namespace? Yes. So it's like a logical grouping of your Kubernetes resources. So will I able to organize more better if I have to deploy a lot of applications and again lot of teams are using same Kubernetes cluster? Can I have namespaces and can I request them to deploy their applications in whatever namespaces created for them, for that team or for that project or for that application, whatever it is? So that way, will I able to organize my Kubernetes cluster more efficiently? Yes. And also permissions also. Let's say team A is working and team B is working. Now, let's say as a general practice, as a general requirement, team A people, will they, do you grant for team A people? I mean to say for team A developers, are you going to grant access to get the team B related pods, deployments? Is it recommended to grant update, delete permissions for the team B applications, whatever team B is deployed for team A and vice versa? So we should not grant like that. Team A can access, update, delete only their applications, and team B should be able to delete, update Kubernetes resources, whatever it belongs to them. So I can create a separate namespace for team B and I can create a separate namespace for team A. Is it possible to grant permissions at a namespace level? So team A developers can only create, update, delete only within that namespace. They cannot get, update, delete anything in other namespace. Is that possible? Can we manage security at a namespace level, access to the developers at a namespace level? Yes. So using namespace, you can apply security also. Security in the sense, the developers working in team A cannot get update delete, the applications which is managed by other team. So we can apply security. And also more, even resources also we can allocate. Resources also we can allocate. At a namespace level, also we can allocate a resources. So within namespace, the name should be unique. Within namespace, name should be unique. What does it mean? Suppose I have one namespace. Can I create a deployment with name called ABC here? Kubernetes object or Kubernetes pod or Kubernetes deployment with name ABC here. And also in other namespace also, can I have a deployment with name ABC? Other namespace. In other namespace I'm talking. Yes. Because simple, let's consider this is one folder, this is another folder. Within that folder, can you have a file with abc.txt? In another folder also, can you have a file with abc.txt? Same concept. Namespace is a logical grouping of your Kubernetes resources. Within namespace, name should be unique. But in the same namespace, can I have a two objects with same name? Can I have a two objects with same name? Can I have two resources with same name? No. But in different namespace? In different namespace? Yes. And also, as I already told, some people are working in one project. Is it possible to grant access to that people only to this namespace? They can get, update, delete Kubernetes resources only in this namespace. They cannot update, delete, create anything in other namespace. Is it possible to manage security for the different teams in the same cluster? Yes, that is also possible using namespace. That we will discuss when we go for a RBAC. And also performance. What is the meaning of performance? Resources. Is it possible to allocate resources, limit resources at a namespace level? Because let's take this Kubernetes cluster. Let's take this Kubernetes cluster. As of now, what is the capacity or how much resources I have in my Kubernetes cluster, whatever I created now? Let's say, what is the capacity of my Kubernetes cluster, whatever I have? Yesterday also I discussed. What is the capacity of my Kubernetes cluster? I have total how many nodes total as of now? 3 nodes. The master node has 4 GB RAM and a 2 core CPU, and this one 1 GB RAM and 1 core CPU. This is also 1 GB RAM and 1 core CPU. So what is my cluster capacity? How much resources I have in my cluster? I can say 6 GB RAM and 4 CPU. Now let's say, forget about namespace concept. Now team A is there, team B is there. They are working for same project, same client, same project, same client. But these guys are working on some different application. These guys are working on some different application, let's say. Now, as I already told, can we deploy different applications in same Kubernetes cluster? Different applications, same client, same project. Yes. But now, if we are trying to deploy like this, do I need some way to isolate, manage the applications in this cluster if I am trying to share this Kubernetes cluster with multiple teams, multiple applications in the same project? I need some way of isolation. So That is where namespace comes into picture. That is where namespace comes into picture. Can I create a namespace for one application or team? Like for this team, can I create one namespace with that application name or that team name or application name? With that name, we can create a namespace. Basically, the namespaces will be with application names. Application names. Let's say this team A is working on some application like customer care app, something like this. They are working on customer care app. These guys are working on maybe vendors application, something like that. So to isolate within the same Kubernetes cluster, they are going to deploy this customer care application related pods, services, volumes, deployments, all those things. And vendors related application, also pods, deployments, services, volumes, all things will be created. So forget about namespace concepts. If you don't have a namespace concept, do you have a problem of organizing the applications in this cluster, managing application in this cluster? If you don't have, forget about namespace concepts for some time, you have a problem here. If you don't have a namespace concept, you have a problem here because you are creating like this. You are creating like this. Do you have a problem with the names also? Name conflicts also? If you don't have a namespace concept, suppose the team A is trying to create one deployment with a name called ABC, and vendor team also will be able to create a deployment with name called ABC. If you don't have a namespace concept, no. Names conflict will come. At the same time, since you don't have isolation, let's say if anyone execute, let's assume you don't have a namespace concept. If anyone executes something like this, is everyone able to see the parts which is deployed by this team and the parts deployed by this team also? Will they able to see? If you don't have that namespace concept, right? Yes. Now, if I have a namespace concept here, can I create a namespace for this team? Can I create a namespace for this team? As a Kubernetes administrator, I can create a namespace for this team, namespace for this team. Logical grouping. It's not physical. Then can I grant permissions to this namespace for the guys who is working on only this one, only this application? So they can only create, update, delete, get only in this namespace. And for this team, can I grant permissions to only that namespace? Suppose I created a namespace like this. Can I grant permissions only to this team on this namespace? So if this team is try to get something on this namespace, can I block saying that you don't have permissions to get object Kubernetes resources from that namespace? You cannot update or delete the Kubernetes in that namespace? Yes. We can manage security and also Kubernetes resources. Let's say I have these teams. What is my total cluster capacity? In the current use case, what is my total cluster capacity? 6 GB. Now, when these guys are deploying their pods, their applications, will these pods internally create a containers? So is those containers will take some CPU memory wherever it is deployed. Forget about whether that pod is here or here, that doesn't matter, is those parts are going to take some CPU and memory from that node, wherever it is getting deployed. From that node it will take. Now, let's say team A is trying to deploy lot of pods. Team A is trying to deploy lot of pods, and each pod they are requesting some CPU. They are requesting for each pod, they are requesting some CPU like this. Since this cluster is shared, now if team A is trying to deploy lot of pods and I don't have a control on this team to limit, let's consider, then does the team B will run out of resources in this cluster? Does the team B will have enough CPU, enough memory available in this cluster to deploy their applications? If team A is deploying lot of applications, does team B will have enough CPU memory available? No, it won't have. If I don't limit, this will not have. So is it possible to allocate resources? How much resources can be utilized in this namespace while creating a namespace? Is it possible? Yes. Which means you can set the quota. There is a concept called resource quota. This is very, very important in the interview also. Resource quota. So for this namespace, can I set the quota? Quota in the sense how much CPU can be used in that namespace, irrespective of any pods. Let's say if I say 2 CPU memory, for that namespace I say 2 GB. Let's say I can say pods, number of pods. If I say number of pods as 2, while creating a resource quota, if I mention like this, for within this namespace, suppose while creating a resource quota, I said for that namespace pods is only 2. So within this namespace, can we create more than 2 pods? If I set the resource quota for that namespace number of pods as 2, will they able to create more than 2 pods? They cannot create more than 2 pods. So they cannot have more than 2 pods. Now if I say memory as 2 GB, CPU as 2, whatever pods, whatever containers you are creating, all those containers, will they able to go beyond this much CPU and memory? Even though you try to deploy, does Kubernetes will allow? It will reject. So this way, will I able to manage my Kubernetes resources when I am sharing my Kubernetes cluster with multiple teams? Will I able to manage my Kubernetes resources for each team or each application using this namespace resource quota concept? Yes. So can I create n number of namespaces? Can I create n number of namespaces? Yes. For each namespace, can I manage security? Can I allocate resources for each namespace? Yes. So Kubernetes components are already logically isolated. Kubernetes components are already logically isolated. But will I able to see some folder like this? It is not a folder, guys. These namespaces are not exactly folder. It's a logical grouping. Just to make it simple, right? You are logically grouping those resources. So this Kubernetes is also running as a pods. So who is any Kubernetes object you want to create or delete or deploy, when I am executing kubectl command, is request is going to API server in the background. Is that API server is persisting information in etcd, and the scheduler is communicating with worker using kubelet. It's communicating with kubelet. On which port kubelet process is running, guys? On which port kubelet process is running? Yesterday we discussed. And which port kubelet process is running? What is the port of kubelet? One zero two five zero. 10250 is the port of kubelet. You see here itself, guys. So this kubelet, right? It is running on 10250. Okay. That kubelet. Netstat is not there. If you have a netstat, you can see. And is that API server is running on 6443. So they are making calls, network calls, API calls, network calls with each other. Kavita, someone was asking, sir, if they are already isolated, how they will control? They are running as one application, one process. Does one process can communicate with other process, or one application can communicate with other application using the IP or port, IP and port, or service name and port? It is basically in the background APIs. One application is trying to communicate with other application. Now if you see 10250, 10250, the kubelet will be listening on 10250. Do you see here? Is 10250 is used? Is kubelet is listening on 10250 port? Here? So it is going to communicate using those ports, all those things. So namespace is logically isolating with each other. Is everyone clear, guys? What is namespace? And the default namespace is for the deployments. We have not given any namespace. So when I am trying to deploy some application, when I'm trying to deploy some pod, some deployment, some service, I have not given any namespace. In which namespace that pod or deployment or service, whatever you are trying to create, in which namespace that will be deployed? While deploying, if I don't give any namespace, that will be deployed in default namespace. So in kube system namespace, all the things related to Kubernetes system. So is it recommended to deploy any applications, any other applications in this namespace? No. So we have a kube public and kube system. And again, we are not going to deploy anything in kube public and kube system. Kube public and kube system. We are not going to deploy anything in kube public. And we are not going to deploy anything in this kube node release also. We don't have nothing, right? So the name itself is saying public, which means by default, does everyone will have a full access in this namespace? It is saying kube public. So by default, everyone will have a full access on this namespace by default. So that's why we are not going to use this one as well as this one also. We are going to create a separate namespace on our own. Now, why we need to use namespaces? As I already told, isolation. Isolating Kubernetes resources of one application or one team from other applications or other teams. Can I use namespaces? Concept? Very simple to tell you. Let's say this is your home. Within your home, you will have a small rooms. So can I call this as one cluster? Can I call, just to relate with Kubernetes cluster, this is cluster. This room, can I call it as namespace? within this room, can I place my belongs, all whatever belonging to me in other room, kind of other namespace, maybe my brother, my sibling, whoever they are staying, they can have their belongings in that room. Similarly, you have a logical concept in Kubernetes. This is in your Kubernetes cluster. You have a namespaces. Using that namespaces, you are logically isolating your Kubernetes resources from other Kubernetes resources. And also, can I allocate how much resources can be utilized by this namespace, like how many pods can be deployed in this namespace, how much CPU and memory can be utilized by the pods which is running in that namespace. Can I set the quota using resource quota? Yes, we can do that. Namespace is very small concept, but I took almost 1 hour to make you understand. Is everyone clear what is namespace? Why we need namespace? What is the whole purpose of namespace in Kubernetes? It's very small concept. But the guys who are completely new to Kubernetes containers, it will be very difficult to understand. So that's why I spent a lot of time to make you understand here. Namespaces are used for isolation. Now, if required, can I create a namespace? Now, I can start deploying my application, any application. I can start deploying my any application now. Maybe I want to deploy this application. I want to deploy this application, which we already deployed. So I can deploy this application in that Kubernetes. Now, if I don't mention in which namespace that the pod which I'm going to create for this application, if I don't mention which namespace, in which namespace that pod, that container, that pod will be created? Default. Default. If required, can I create my own namespace and deploy in that? Yes. We will do that in some time. Vinay is asking, within the same cluster, can we have a different namespaces for environments like prod, stage, dev, or it is not recommended? So this is also sometimes they ask in the interview. What Vinay is asking, in same Kubernetes cluster, can I use namespace concept, dev as one namespace, stage as one namespace, prod as another namespace? Which means within same cluster, can I create a namespace with a name called dev? Can I deploy in this namespace? Can I treat this as a dev environment, stage, separate namespace, prod, separate namespace in the same cluster? Is it recommended? It is not recommended. It is not recommended. For each environment, separate cluster. But let's say in the dev itself, in the dev or stage itself, or let's say in the stage itself, I want to have a two environments like stage one and stage two. Let's say instead of going with the two clusters for stage one, this one separate cluster, this one separate cluster, within one cluster, can I again go with the namespace concept here? I will create one cluster. Within that cluster, can I have a namespace like stage one and stage two, where I can deploy same applications in stage one namespace and stage two namespace? Maybe if you have these type of requirements, you can use that. But are you going to have everything in a same cluster, like dev environment as a namespace in same cluster, QA environment as a namespace in same cluster? No, that is not recommended. This is not recommended. Okay. Now, let me create a namespace now. How to create namespace? Again, to create any Kubernetes resource, how can I do? Namespace is also one Kubernetes resource. If I want to create, as of now, I am getting the namespace. Similarly, if I want to create a namespace also, what needs to be done? How can I create? Whom should I request? API server, API. But again, how I can communicate with API? Can I use kubectl? Yes. But here there are two things: imperative, 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 and declarative. Imperative way and declarative way. We can create any Kubernetes resource imperatively and declaratively. What is the meaning of imperative? Command. Imperative command, something like this: kubectl create ns, that name, whatever name you want to create, namespace name. And if you have some options also, you can use those options. This is imperative. Now, declarative. What is the meaning of declarative? Using Kubernetes manifest files. Using manifest files. We call it as a Kubernetes manifest. So, manifest files in the form of what? YAML or YML. So, I can have a Kubernetes manifest. And using that Kubernetes manifest, can I request my API server again? Something like this, that manifest file name. Can I define what object, what Kubernetes resource has to be created? Can I define in one YML? Can I use that YML? Can I request my Kubernetes using that YML? So this kubectl will try to send whatever we have defined in this YML to the API server. That API server will create again. We can use imperatively and we can use declaratively. But which one is widely used to create, deploy anything, to deploy or update anything in Kubernetes? Which one is widely used? Declarative. For small things you can use. For small things we can use imperative. But again, declarative is recommended, because if it is a declarative, can I have this as a source code? Can I have this as a source code and maintain these YMLs in the version control systems also? Can I track what is being updated in this Kubernetes manifest files? Who updated again? So this is also kind of a source code. Your Kubernetes objects, Kubernetes manifest files are objects. Can I maintain as a source code in the version control system? And can I use this manifest from the version control system to deploy in Kubernetes? Yes. So if you are doing everything using command, will you be able to keep a track of what is being executed earlier, what is being modified later? If you are doing everything using command? No. But instead of command, I am using a manifest file and I am keeping a track of those changes in the version control system. If someone modified the manifest, can I go and check in the version control system who modified that manifest, what is being updated in that manifest? And also I can deploy that using manifest also. So we can use manifest or imperative. But which one is widely used? Not only namespace here I am talking about. Any Kubernetes resource, whether you are creating a namespace, whether you are creating these objects in that namespace, whether you are creating a pod, service, anything, can I define that in the form of Kubernetes manifest? Whatever I want to create, update in the form of manifest? Yes, you can do that way. So just to give an example, if it is a namespace, how to create imperatively? Imperatively, I can execute a command like this: kubectl create ns. What is ns in the short form? Namespace. Can I use something like this? Namespace also full. Yes. Namespace, that namespace name. Let's say I am giving something like this: test -ns. Just I am using ns as a best naming strategy, naming standards. I can create like this also, test. I can create like this also, test. Just to give an example. But in real time, are you going to have namespace like test ABC XYZ like that? That respective application name or that respective team name you will have for whatever team, whatever application, relevant names. Something like this I can create. If it is a declarative, do I need to write a YML file, manifest file? Yes. So that manifest file in the form of what? YML. Does Kubernetes supports JSONs also, JSON files also as a manifest file instead of YML? Does Kubernetes support JSON also instead of YAML? Yes, it supports JSON also instead of YAML. But are you going to use JSON formats to create Kubernetes objects? No. 99.99% YMLs are used, not JSON. But in the interview, they'll ask, does Kubernetes supports JSON also instead of YAML to deploy Kubernetes objects or resources? Can I define in a JSON format? Will it support? Yes, it will support. But we are not going to use. So if it is a YML, it will be something like this: API version, kind, meta, data. For namespace, you will have something like this: API version, kind, metadata. Kind, what kind of Kubernetes resource? What kind of Kubernetes object you want to create? Can I call this as a kind? Can I call pod also as one kind or object or resource? Can I call this one also as a kind? All these Kubernetes objects can be here. But for now, what kind of Kubernetes object I want to create? As of now, I want to create a namespace. I want to create a namespace. So can I give kind as namespace here? YML key, there should be a space. There should be a space between this colon and your value. YML you already know. So namespace. So for each Kubernetes object, there is a specific API version. For each Kubernetes object, there is a specific API version. So this namespace belongs to which API version? So here I have given one table. Here I have given one table, something like this. So kind, if it is a pod, what is the API version? Kind, if it is a replication controller, what is the API version? If it is a deployment, what is the API version? I have given like this. Now for namespace also there is a API version. What is that API version? Basically V1. V1. But sir, how do I know whether it's a V1 or something else? Go to your system. You have a kubectl installed. Execute this command: kubectl API resources. Execute API resources. This kubectl, this API resources command is going to list all the API resources, which means all the Kubernetes objects. All the Kubernetes objects, whatever Kubernetes is going to support. Now I can see lot of Kubernetes resources. Are we going to use all these Kubernetes resources again for deploying any application? No. Based on your requirement, you will use appropriate Kubernetes resource. Now, if you see, do I have a Kubernetes resource called namespace here? Do I have a Kubernetes resource called namespace here? Kind. Kind is what? Can I take this one as a kind if I want to create a namespace? Can I take this one as a kind? This one. And for that namespace, what is the API version? What is the API version which you can see? V1. V1. Version 1. Now, short names also you can see. So this is the full name. What is the short name for that? NS. Like this, do you have a other Kubernetes objects also like service, resource quota, pod, persistent volume claim, deployment, daemon set, stateful set. Can you see all these things as a Kubernetes resources? These are the Kubernetes resources or objects. If you don't know what is the API version for any Kubernetes object, can I go and execute this command and see what are the Kubernetes objects as of now it is offering and what is the respective API version for that Kubernetes object? Can I see by executing this command? kubectl API resources. Now, V1. Metadata. In general, what is metadata, guys? In general, what is metadata? In general English, what is metadata? It's a data about data. Now, under metadata, I am giving name. So this name is for what? Whatever name I am going to give here. This name is for what? This name is basically for namespace. For namespace. So here I can give something like this. Test. Now we can also add a labels. What is labels? Basically labels are key value pairs. Labels are key value pairs. Some additional information. Let's say I want to know which team is using this namespace. For which team I am giving this namespace. Can I say this is created for QA team, something like this? Some labels, additional data. Labels, key value pairs. This is not mandatory, but by adding the labels, these labels will be attached to this namespace. These labels will be attached to this namespace. Anytime if I inspect this namespace, will I able to see whatever labels has been added to that namespace? Will I able to understand which team is, suppose I am adding like this, team name and their DL, let's say something like this. But @ is not allowed. @ is not allowed in the values. Let's say I am giving something like this. Something like this. @ is not allowed. You cannot use @ in the labels. These special characters are not allowed in the values. Instead of giving like this, without this, I can have something like this. So these labels are not mandatory, but if you add a labels, will it be easy for you to recognize for which team, for what purpose you have created anytime you inspect? Yes, you can add a labels like this. So this is my YML. And can I use this command kubectl apply -f? This file I will save. Let's say I have saved with some name like this. Can I execute something like this? Suppose I have saved this file as test.yml. Can I execute like this? Does this information will be sent to the kubectl? This information, will it be sent to the API server by kubectl? Yes. This is declarative way. This is declarative way. Now, let me show that. I am creating a manifest file, something like this. API version v1 kind namespace metadata name. I am saying something like this test. Is this mandatory labels? Not mandatory, but I can give something like this. Just anything. This key also any, value also anything. Something like this. This is not allowed. Special characters are not allowed here. Special characters are not allowed as in the values of labels. This is not allowed. I'm just giving something like this. Any key value pair I can give. Something like this. Now this is just a namespace. If required, while creating a namespace, can I create one more Kubernetes resource called resource quota? For this namespace, can I create one more Kubernetes object called resource quota for this namespace if required? In the same YML, can I separate it with the 3 dashes? YML we already know. So we can separate with these 3 dashes, one object with other. Can I create in same YML, can I create a resource quota also if required? I will explain that resource quota later. Because we are just learning. If I explain everything in the beginning itself, you will get confused. We will discuss that later. Resource quota. I am not applying any quota as of now. I am just creating a namespace. Now, this is my YML. Can I execute this command? kubectl apply -f, something like this. But again, in the background, his kubectl is going to make a API call using this information. Whatever information I have defined in this YML, does kubectl will send that data as a request body to the API server. Again, everything is a REST APIs in the background. But before applying, do I have anything with that namespace as of now? Do I have any namespace called test? Do I have any namespace called test as of now? If you see, no. Now let me apply kubectl apply -f. I want to show you what is happening in the background. So this -v stands for verbose. It is going to print some additional logs in the background. If I don't use this one, is it going to print additional logs? No. So just to show you, I am printing something like this using this option. Let's see what is happening in the background. Now if you see, I executed kubectl apply. Because of this option, I can see all these logs. But if I don't use that option, I can see only this one, namespace created. If I don't use that option, I can see only this one, this namespace created. Since I use that option, let me show what is happening. So if you see, first, is it making one API call here? Is it making one API call? Is it sending that request? Namespace, is it, it is making a API call to the namespaces. First it is checking whether we have a namespace with that name. So it said there is no namespace. First it is checking whether we have that namespace with that name. So it said no, 404. So with this name, namespace is not there, 404. So once it has identified that there is no namespace, right? If you see, is it saying not found? In the background, it is first checking whether you already have that namespace. Do you see it is already saying that is not found, that namespace test not found. So it is saying there is no namespace with that name. Then is it again making another API call post call with this request body? With this request body. API version v1, kind is namespace. So namespace name is test. These are the labels. With this request body, is it making again one API call, post call with that request body to the API server? Is that API server received this request and created the namespace in the cluster? If you see with this, it has requested again and we got a response saying that it is created. We got a response saying that namespace is created. But you no need to worry about all these things in the background, what is happening, but you will have a better idea. So what is Kubernetes, how it is working in the background? Kubernetes is nothing but one software that is developed in some programmatic language. It is all about APIs only. But do you need to really know what is API? What is happening in the background when you are executing? As a DevOps engineer, you no need to worry. But it is easy to understand when you are having all these things. The concept will be more clear. Now, with that, is the namespace created now? Can I see that namespace? Test.ns namespace now? The test namespace. The namespace name is just a test. Can I see that namespace now? Now, as of now, I am saying -n test. As of now, do I have any Kubernetes objects like pods, deployments, services, anything deployed in this namespace? If you see, no, nothing is there. Now, if I don't mention -n, what is the default names? I know what is the namespace this kubectl is pointing by default. The default namespace. In default namespace also, do you have any pods or deployments like that except this service? Do you have anything? Pods, deployments like this? No. Now, if required, I want to deploy one application. If required, I want to deploy one application. Kubernetes is all about deployment. But before deploying, do you need to have an image created for your application? Before you come to Kubernetes, do you need to have image created for your application, your microservice or whatever it is? You need to have an image created. That image should be there. That image should be there in some registry. That can be Docker Hub registry, that can be Nexus registry, that can be ECR, whatever it is, that image should be there in some registry. So, do I already have an image created for this application using this Docker file? Using this Docker file, did I created an image? Is that image is already available in the registry? Yes. Where is that image? As of now, it is in Docker Hub. hub.docker.com public registry. hub.docker.com public registry. So I have an image here. Now, if I want to deploy this image in my Kubernetes, even though I use Docker to create this image, can I deploy this image in the Kubernetes even though my container runtime is containerd? Yes, because I already explained what is OCI, Open Container Initiative, as a standards. Everyone is following that one. So we can deploy. Now, can I deploy this application in Kubernetes now? Yes. But in Kubernetes, can I deploy this as a container directly? Does Kubernetes will allow you to deploy containers directly? No. In Kubernetes, we cannot deploy the containers directly. We have to deploy a pod, or you need to create a pod. What is pod? What do we have inside the pod? What is pod? How to create a pod? We will discuss in detail tomorrow. We will discuss from here what is pod, how to create a pod. We are going to discuss tomorrow, guys. Today The whole day went for namespace only. I think this much is not required. Let me see if I can cut down. Maybe just 30 minutes is more than sufficient for namespace. But today I took almost 1.5 hours. Maybe I might have explained same thing multiple times. So namespace is very small concept, but at the same time very important concept. But at least you can remember. If I explain 1.5 hours, you may remember whatever I have explained maybe for 10 minutes. If I explain maybe just 30 minutes, you will forget everything if I ask what is namespace. So that is fine. Let's see. Now people are asking, if I use just -v, will it not work? kubectl get all -v, it is not going to work. What is this 891 something like this in verbose, right? What level? If I am using 1, am I getting any logs like this? If I am using 6, some level of logs, some logs, but not in detail. If I am using 7, some more logs. If I am using 8, more logs. That is just an option. That is just an option for that kubectl. Don't focus too much on that options. Focus on the actual concept. Don't focus on the commands. Commands, there is a cheat sheet for you. Command, there is a cheat sheet for you. If you know only commands, by hearting the commands, if you don't know what is namespace, how can I allocate resources for namespace, what is Kubernetes cluster, what is pod, what is deployment, what is service. If you just by heart the commands, step 1, execute this, step 2, execute this, that is of no use. Don't by heart any command or step 1 approach, don't learn. Understand the concept. What is Kubernetes cluster, what is namespace, what is deployment, what is pod, what is service, what is resource quota. That is important. Concept is important. Don't focus too much on commands. Commands is important. But if you only know the commands, if you don't know the actual concept which we are trying to discuss here, that is of no use. Thank you guys. I'll continue tomorrow with pod. What is pod? How to create pod? We'll discuss tomorrow. Thank you.